Good evening and thanks for joining us on the Week in Review. I'm Nick Blumberg. The pressure on Illinois House Speaker Chris Welch isn't going anywhere as questions swirl around whether he'll keep his position.
We're separate, as you know, branches of government, and I think that decision will be made by House members.
Governor J.B. Pritzker calls for greater transparency and improved safeguards against sexual harassment, but won't opine on Welch's post. But an outspoken Democratic lawmaker says she doesn't think a new working group Welch set up will be credible or effective.
I don't know if specifically there's a political will to address just the CPS problem.
On the heels of the Chicago School Board passing a budget counting on unsecured state funding, some lawmakers say the only possible way forward is to address needs of school districts statewide.
I am thrilled, honored, and deeply humbled to announce that I am running to be the next mayor of the city.
The worst-kept secret in politics is out as Secretary of State Alexi Giannoulias announces his bid to lead Chicago. And businessman Willie Wilson announces he's running too, making a fourth attempt at the mayor's office. Meantime, Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez sues over what he claims are onerous ballot access rules. And Chicago's U.S. attorney says there's no need for a special prosecutor probe of the Broadview 6 case. And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Patrick Fingston of the Illinois Political Blog, Laura Washington of the Chicago Tribune and ABC 7 News, Carrie Shepard of Axios Chicago, and Michael Puente of WBEZ. Thank you all for being here. Let's get right to it. Lots to cover, as always. Laura, the issue of sexual harassment facing House Speaker Chris Welch still firmly in the spotlight in the news this week. What are you watching for as you gauge how likely it is that he retains his speakership? I'm
watching particularly for the women in the legislature and what kinds of positions they're going to take. They've been mostly quiet so far. Some of the Republican women have been speaking up, Republicans in general, but you know what happened with Mike Madigan. It was the women's leadership that brought him down, and so I think there's going to be more shoes to drop. There may be more information out there, and some people, including the governor, are saying they're waiting to see what more there is before they take a position.
Women have the ability, the House Democratic women have the ability, if they vote as a bloc, to replace Welch tomorrow. Mm-hmm. They have 46 out of 78 members. They can do whatever they want. Problem is, they're split. Most of the Democratic women that I've been speaking to are frustrated with Welch. They're unhappy with this story. He has a strong group of support from the black women in the House Democratic caucus. So at this point, he's safe within that group. The question is what keeps coming out and who steps up. There's no other female candidate that would be emerging at this point. There's no moderate candidate that would be emerging at this point. There's no black or Latino candidate that would be emerging at this point. And you know what they say, you can't beat somebody with nobody.
Absolutely, but they're also afraid. I mean, we have an election coming up in November, and some of these people have races that they need to win, and there
are no real competitive races.
But if they cross him, then he could get vengeance later.
Yeah, if he's going to go, try to primary them in 2 or 4 years.
Sure. If he remains Speaker, he's going to be still very powerful.
Of course.
Well, and we saw, the Speaker doing kind of the media rounds this week, including apologizing for his own conduct about communicating with the former staffer, pledging to do better. From what you've seen, does it feel like that message is getting through, that it's landing?
Yeah, I mean, as Laura noted, like a lot of Democrats aren't speaking up with the exception of Representative Kelly Cassidy, and she actually didn't support his speakership when he was first elected after Michael Madigan was forced to step down. So, I mean, maybe others will speak up. Speaker Welch said he's embarrassed, but I don't know if the message is getting through. I don't know actually what other shoe could drop at this point since the Inspector General's report is already out. It's pretty damning of Benton. And
the Tribune is still working
the Tribune's
on the
still
story.
Working. I'm sure,
so if there's anything else out there,
I'm sure Jeremy will get it. Exactly. Yeah, for sure,
right.
sure. So yeah, I mean, I think the Speaker still should probably be looking and seeing what's happening. And to Laura's point of he's still very powerful. He did give Benton $1.4 million to get him reelected after these allegations first surfaced in 2023. So.
And let's be clear, he saved Benton in 2024. Polling had Benton down to Gabby Shanahan in early October in 2024. He spent $1 million on broadcast TV in the last couple of weeks of that election to save Benton by about 2,000 votes. He didn't just overlook what happened or spend a little bit of money on one of his members. He went out of his way to save a member that he knew this about. And there are people inside that caucus that are not going to forget that.
Well, and the question is, what was his motivation for doing that?
Right.
And he says it was labor, that labor was behind him and he wanted to keep labor happy. But some people in the labor movement say that's not the case. No. There's conspiracy theories out there where maybe Benton knew something that he needed to protect himself about. So, I'm sure he's very sorry he spent that $1.4 million. He'd love to take it back now.
Well, and it was a meaningless seat for him too, right? It was the difference in 78 and 77, right? And you're still in the supermajority at that point.
Well, and we heard Governor Pritzker sort of stopping short of weighing in on whether the speaker should keep his job. Mayor Brandon Johnson similarly, didn't weigh in one way or the other. Is that sort of support for Welch perhaps eroding, or is this just them kind of staying out of the House of Representatives business?
I think it's him trying to just stay out of the House of Representatives business. I mean, you got to think the governor, maybe there's something that could hit him with this whole controversy. He needs Welch in there. Really tough time for him to backtrack now. So,
and to your point about the African American legislators and African American voters, Pritzker doesn't want to do anything to unsettle that. It looked like he's going after or criticizing the first black speaker.
Yeah, in the country, not just in Illinois. Well, and Carrie, we were talking a little bit about Representative, Cassidy declining to join Welch's working group, essentially saying she's worried it's a PR stunt. She was also, one of the people out front early on, pushing against Speaker Madigan. I mean, what did you make of her comments about that sexual harassment working group?
Yeah, I mean, I think a working group is just as it is in the private sector. We always are a little skeptical that any change is going to come from it. I mean, so I didn't super surprise me since, as you noted, she, as we talked about, she hadn't supported him before. So if whether she's going to get more Democrats from the Women's Caucus to join, remains to be seen. I mean, I don't think that the mayor has much to gain from calling for Welch to step down. It remains to be seen what the governor has to as we get closer to November. If it's going to hit him, he's probably going to make some sort of move to call for him to step down.
Yeah, going to be very interesting to see if anything else comes out about this, but doesn't feel like this story is going away necessarily anytime soon. Another bit of business in Springfield. State lawmakers have been getting a lot of questions over the past week after the Chicago School Board, voted to pass a budget that includes $150 million in expected state funding that they want to see passed in the veto session. Patrick, any measure needs a 3/5 majority to pass with immediate effect in November. Is there any path forward given that steep hurdle, to mix metaphors?
Zero at this point, right? Zero chance that there's just a magic $150 million for CPS that gets passed during veto session. One, there's already an issue inside the State House with CPS. They get more money per pupil than any other school district in the state. Why is a kid in Chicago worth more than a kid in Vienna? That's in Southern Illinois, by the way.
Well, because they have 25 times more enrollment, probably part of it, right?
But per pupil, right?
Yeah.
I mean, per pupil spending, right? Or Springfield, or Quad Cities, anywhere like that, right? CPS gets way more per kid than everyone else. And to just throw more money at them is not going to get support from Republicans or Democrats at this point. So if the speaker's going to have to make this a Christmas tree to put a whole bunch of school spending onto the suburbs and downstate and try and make his members happy, that price tag gets really high really fast, to the tune of $750 million, $1 billion. Where does that money come from? You're talking about a general tax increase at that point, either an income tax or a corporate tax increase, and good luck finding the votes there.
And now, of course, the speaker says he never heard anything about a number, and he never put a number on his commitment, the $150 million or anything else. So he said he would work to try to get more funding.
And
which
CTU's been
pretty
throwing
vague.
that number around for months, so he's surely heard it.
Yeah, but he never said it. He never promised it.
Yeah, but he's being used now as a pawn by CTU, and CTU's taking him out there and making him their symbol for their cause.
And that's the cost of doing that for political cover, right?
Yeah.
He went to CTU saying, help me shore up my base. because I've got political problems, and if he doesn't come through for them, then he has a whole new problem with a big part of his constituency in African Americans and progressives, and that gets him in even hotter water if we get into 2027.
Yeah. Well, turning to some city news, the mayor's race is not until February, or the mayor's election, I should say, isn't until February, but we get new entrants every day. 2 more this week, Laura, Alexi Giannoulias and Willie Wilson. How do you see the state of the race for Chicago mayor right now?
As you said in your intro, no big surprises with either one of those people. The state of the race is that Alexi Giannoulias is perceived as a front runner, along with Brandon Johnson, assuming that Brandon Johnson runs. Willie Wilson is his 4th time running for mayor. I think he's perceived as and could be a spoiler for Brandon Johnson in particular, because he has a strong base in the African American community. The last 3 elections, he's gotten around 10%. He can probably get that much again, and that's going to come right out of Brandon Johnson's hide.
Well, and it's interesting talking about Giannoulias as a front runner. You know, a lot of folks point to his political war chest, which is, you know, quite huge. But, you know, we saw in the Senate race that Raja Krishnamurthy had a huge cash advantage, and it didn't end up, you know, working to his benefit. So.
Absolutely. So you could see this story play out all over again, and another similarity is that he's starting so early, as you say. It's 6 months out. Spending a lot of money up front, which is the same thing that Krishnamurthy did, a lot to try to define himself. And in the meantime, some of his opponents, particularly Giannoulias Stratton, held back and waited until the right time, which was probably going to be early next year to really to come in. So he may be starting too early, and he may burn out too fast.
Yeah, let's be clear. The front runner didn't win the last couple of mayoral elections, and Willie Wilson played a role in that as well. He, you know, helped Lori Lightfoot get past, you know, Tony Preckwinkle a bit. So, you know, it remains to be seen. Obviously, front runner is we equate with huge war chest at this point, because Giannoulias has a big one.
I think there are going to be a lot of questions about authenticity too, because I've known Giannoulias since 2005. Covered his first race for treasurer, his race for U.S. Senate, his comeback in 2021. He has never used the kind of progressive language that he's been using in the last few days. And if that doesn't come across as authentic with voters, like Brandon Johnson came across as authentic with his very progressive messaging. Voters are going to see through that, no matter whether you have $22 million in the bank or $2 million or $2 in the bank, right? So he's going to have to really find a way. And there's been a few cases in the interviews he's done in the last few days where there hasn't been a lot of there. So he's really going to have to try and find a message that people can relate to and think is real, other than, well, here's just another politician talking at us.
And one of the things I think he's trying to do is be Obama-esque.
Yes,
First of all, reminding
sure.
us that he played basketball with Obama for the millionth time. Plus, even the way his
oratorial,
his ad that he's got out now, it's like, you know, it's very speechifying, it's very uplifting, and you know, like you say though, that there's not much meat on those bones. That's just a lot of rhetoric. Yeah.
But we do know how popular Willie Wilson is too, with those big gas giveaways, not just in the city, in the suburbs as well. Yeah. You know, I mean, so you know, working poor people, they know him. They maybe can relate to him, and
they find him authentic too.
Right.
I mean,
absolutely.
He didn't have to do that, so. You know, I just see him though. He's such a laid-back type of person. How aggressive is he going to get to? Does he really want this mayoral race?
Wilson or Giannoulias?
Wilson. Wilson.
Yeah. Well, and the other question about authenticity, I mean, Giannoulias is, of course, running for re-election as Secretary of State while he's also running for mayor. You know, do voters care about that double dipping, or is it just cranky journalists and political watchers?
I sure do wish they cared. I wrote about this a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a good comment.
Nobody cared. Now it's getting out there, but you know, I think people don't really even understand the system well enough to realize what's going on.
I agree with that. It's a lot of questions online. I saw when Politico reported it, you know, like, can he do that? But as we saw with Mayor Biss, who is now the congressional candidate, you know, in the 9th, like, this didn't seem to bother people, even though now they have to have a special election in Evanston. So, yeah, should they care? Probably, but I don't know if they even know.
And I've been told that they're polling both statewide and in the city, voters don't care. Voters don't care at all. And if Republicans had any real presence on that on the statewide ballot instead of a candidate you've never heard of that has $1,800 in the bank. They could make it an issue.
Yeah.
In fact, they should probably find a real Republican, with some name ID and with some fundraising capacity, put them on the ballot, make it a thing over the next 3 months, because right now it's just a waste of time.
But what I find really interesting is that Susana Mendoza is making an issue of this with Giannoulias, but even though she did the same thing last time, but
that didn't hurt her in 2019. The Burke connections hurt her in 2019, not the double dipping.
Right, but she seems to have forgotten that she did that.
Yeah, but she didn't announce until after the election.
Yeah, but everybody knew she was running. Right.
Yeah.
Out there.
And of course, we may have other candidates, likely Cook County Treasurer Maria Pappas, announcing after her
George
reelection.
Cardenas, right. Yeah. There's several people who are doing that.
Yes, it's going to be.
And Quigley's doing the same thing too. But remember, he would be replaced by special election.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Giannoulias would be replaced by appointment of the governor.
This is the mess of an off-cycle election, but keeps us all busy. All right, some immigration-related news this week, Mike. The state of Indiana is suing the town of Merrillville for trying to bar any new immigration facilities. What are the details there?
Well, just so folks know, Northwest Indiana is a historically Democratic area. So Merrillville's a bedroom retail community. Indiana, the very red state, they have a law that requires communities to cooperate with ICE and Department of Homeland Security. Well, DHS was looking for warehouses to have a immigration detention center. They looked at several large ones in Merrillville. Town of Merrillville says, we don't want this here. So they passed a resolution back in January, just a resolution, not an ordinance. Mm-hmm. They're well aware that a resolution can't keep the federal government out. But the Attorney General in Indiana, a staunch Trump supporter, Todd Rokita, says that's still interfering with the federal government, and now we're going to sue you and take you to court.
Even a resolution is too far.
Even a resolution, but town of Merrillville so far is not backing down.
Yeah, they really are digging their heels in.
They're really digging their heels in there. People are saying, hey, look, some of the council people are saying, well, this is violating our First Amendment rights. Yeah. And if you look at the complaint, it is a little troubling in that the Attorney General, Todd Rokita, is describing even residents who have spoken up against an immigration detention center as activists. Well, these are residents in the town. They have a right to say whatever they want to say. So it's interesting to see how far he gets in this. It's filed in Lake County, Indiana, with a judge there, so it could be tossed out. We'll see.
And another case that doesn't necessarily seem like the charges might stick, but ICE has threatened Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart, with charges, as well as the Hennepin County Sheriff, who oversees Minnesota, for not allowing agents access into jails to make immigration-related arrests. I mean, a lot of legal experts don't necessarily think that they're actually going to fight charges, but does this sort of indicate the Trump administration's commitment to trying any avenue possible in its push for mass deportation?
Well, absolutely. We see the difference between the state of Illinois and Indiana. Indiana, if that happened, another lawsuit filed against the sheriff. Here, Sheriff Tom Dart is trying to keep the federal government out. They're going to push back. How far can DHS actually go in the federal government? We'll see.
Another federal lawsuit, Laura. The Trump administration has been attempting to get access to unredacted data on Illinois voters, which a federal judge said is not going to fly. Do you think the fight ends here?
Well, and that's been the case in a number of other states as well. The Trump administration never stops, and they never give up. So I imagine that there'll be more pushing back on that. But I mean, it's a no-brainer. The information that they're seeking is private information. It's the kind of Social Security numbers, addresses, that kind of thing, ages. It's the kind of thing that can be used for many nefarious reasons. So it makes sense that this information should not be released.
Yeah, Patrick, another election-related federal lawsuit here. Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez suing the state over the signature requirements for independents to get on the ballot. Probably a long shot for him to get back on in this current congressional race that he was vying for. Do you think this suit might make it easier for independents in future cycles?
It should. I don't know that it will. I also don't know why he's going to federal court for this, because it's the state gets to mandate the laws for ballot access and petition signatures and that sort of thing. So I'm sure he's going to talk about an equal protection sort of violation, but I think if you're the State Board of Elections, you just show up with Article 1, Section 4 and say it's our job to enforce this law and see you guys later, and he's probably done. The question is what Myra Macias does. I was told from a pretty good source that her petitions had been remedied just after the arbitrary deadline that the State Board of Elections placed. If she files in circuit court, she probably gets on the ballot. And then that makes things a lot more complicated for Patty Garcia as she's trying to sneak her way into Chewy's office.
Yeah, both of them, you know, the Alderman Cesar Lopez, they're sort of speaking for all the activists and progressives who say, wait a second, what happened here? Because many of them see that Chewy Garcia sort of handpicked Patty Garcia, no relation. And that is something that they see as old machine politics. Laura's covered it for a long time. She knows it well, like, you know, and so he's sort of speaking for them, I think, at this point with this lawsuit.
But just for the record, the independent candidate for governor, Colin Corbett, filed 37,000 signatures to get on the ballot, way more than a congressional candidate needs. So what are they complaining about?
Right. Yeah, but they weren't going to get challenged. I mean, there's no one cares about that race.
Well, I mean, Bailey spent a heck of a ton of money trying to get on the ballot.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but the thing is that, you know, they care about it because of the way Chewy handled this.
Yeah.
The law has been there for a long time.
Right.
The situation's been there for a long time. So it's really not about the fairness of the independent issue. It's about what happened with Chewy.
Yeah.
Well, another legal matter. I guess this is the legal section of the show. Carrie, U.S. Attorney Andrew Boutros acknowledging that mistakes were made, and everyone's favorite passive voice, in prosecuting the Broadview Six, but says a special prosecutor isn't necessary, says there are reforms underway. What did you make of that argument?
So this goes back to one of his former ASAs, assistant U.S. attorneys, that there was some, you know, allegedly nefarious behavior by her in the Broadview Six case that, you know, you and I have actually talked to on the show before. And so Boutros is covering his skin a little bit by saying, okay, she left, she's gone, but no, this didn't go any deeper, this didn't go any farther. Well, there has been reports that it did go a little beyond that case, so, you know, that's part of why she stepped down. But yeah, I don't expect him to say, yes, come in and investigate my office deeper. Not many people do invite that.
Right.
Oh, who knows? It could be fun. You know, we've got a federal judge expected to rule on this issue later this month. I mean, given some of the court setbacks that Boutros and his office have faced, do you think their arguments are going to carry the day here?
In a normal world, Boutros should be in big trouble. Right, but the Department of Justice is anything but normal right now. Right. And it's all about loyalty, and he was prosecuting people who were disloyal or aggravating to the Trump administration. So there's, whether he's a Trump supporter or not, there's certainly going to be a less of a level of scrutiny there, which, right or wrong, that's not how the DOJ usually works, and that's that may help him in the end.
Yeah. All right. Well, switching gears, very much so. We don't know whether the lettuce is safe yet or not. We sure hope it is. But Mike, I mean, the cyclist psoriasis outbreak now in 15 states. You talked with a man who didn't just get sick with the illness. There was some lasting fallout. Tell us about that story.
Yeah. Edgar Mercado, 50-year-old from Jefferson Park area, got sick about a month ago. Went to a Taco Bell with his 14-year-old son. A couple of days later, started getting really sick, bedridden. You know, look, I know it's dinner time, so I want to I'll be very careful about it. But he got sick, was diagnosed with having this cyclospora. It really just took about the last few days where he feels normal. He is suing Taco Bell and Taylor Farms for injuries. Now, he's only one of 300 people in Cook County, area, who are being represented by this one law firm. According to Illinois Department of Public Health, there's almost 1,000 people who have been sickened by this cyclospora.
Yeah, could see many more cases here.
Right.
Carrie, a piece you had this week, undocumented students in Illinois have long been able to pay in-state tuition.
Eligible, it's a certain eligibility,
But,
correct.
you know, a downstate federal judge kind of dealt a blow to that. What happens next here? What's this, you know?
Well, the AG's office told me right before I came on that the legislature passed a statute that wouldn't disrupt this eligibility for so many students, for so many in-state unauthorized immigrants who, you know, meet the requirements to get in-state tuition, but also can get MAP grants, which is another important way of financial assistance for Illinois students. So they had until actually today to appeal it. They had a 2-week window, and so they don't seem too concerned, I guess. They said they fought it, but it won't affect the 2027-28 students because of this statute that they got into the law.
And this is, I mean, these sorts of supports, the tuition, the grants, these have been in place for quite some time.
Oh, since 2003, I think was the first bill that passed, and then obviously there is something called the Illinois Dream Fund, which is a privately funded scholarship for dreamers, which of course DACA. So yeah, this has been on the books for decades.
Well, it feels like we've been talking for decades because the conversation has been so fun, but unfortunately we are out of time. So our thanks to Patrick Fingston, Laura Washington, Carrie Shepard, and Michael Puente. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Tonight's presentation of Week in Review is made possible in part by Ann and Rich Carr, BNSF Railway, and Francine and Dr. Anthony Brown. Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation. Additional support is provided by
And that's our show for this Friday night. Visit our website for the latest from WTTW News, including details on a Piping Plover Chick Fest happening in Waukegan. Now, for all of us here at the Week in Review, I'm Nick Blumberg. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy, stay safe, and stay informed. Have a great weekend. I didn't think I'd ever say Chick Fest on the air.
Sounds like a great party.
Yeah, it's a little something different.
Always my favorite story.
The Piping Plovers?
I mean, they capture our imaginations
really
every
do.
summer, it feels like.
They really
but I mean,
do.
I always want to know what people are going to try and name them because they do the contests every year. That to me is the fun part of it, is we could see what they get out of it.
I think there was something at Brookfield Zoo that they were opening up to name. Now I can't remember what it is. Maybe a possum?
A new animal or
A
something?
new animal.
Yeah.
I think it was a possum.
Okay. Oh,
We'd have a lot of fun with
That
that.
would be good.
Let's just give my 4-year-old the job.
Right. Well, and I want to know, what are we going to name the belugas at the shed? Is what because we've got the new ones coming in. So I don't know if they have names already or if we get to
I don't know if you saw those
share our thoughts.
clips of them flying them in are pretty amazing.
It was. I mean, it was a military precision
Yes,
operation.
yes.
It looked like that was pretty fun
Closed
stuff.
captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm working to preserve the dignity and rights of all individuals.